Welcome to the Black and White Bistro Show. Today we've got a real treat for you. Our first featured guest artist of 2025, Mr. Spencer Pullen. Spencer, thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Let me give you a little background on Spencer. He started into photography at the age of 8 when his parents gave him a Kodak 110 Instamatic camera. For those older viewers out there, you probably remember those a lot. Then in college, Spencer discovered graphic design and publishing, and he worked in a newspaper doing photo printing for staff photographers. Next, he decided to go out there and become a freelance photographer, specializing in real estate, product, and portrait photography. The next major milestone was he discovered large format photography with the famous photographer Clyde Butcher. Now, Clyde Butcher's prints are huge. They're measured in feet, not inches. For those of you on the metric system, they're measured in meters, not centimeters. They're massive. Spencer loved black and white in both film and digital in a variety of formats. Spencer, what would you like to add to that quick intro of you?
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride. Like I said, one of the things I do at the newspaper is I actually ran the mini lab for the staff photographers that were there. So that was kind of my first foray into developing and seeing how film was being developed, scanning it, and to the final product that it is, how it ended up in the newspaper. So I just kind of was like, well, this is quite interesting. And then eventually, when I was in the printing industry, a lot of the uh, clients that I would have would come to me and say, "Oh, I need a brochure. I need flyers." I'd say, "Okay, well, where's your artwork to put in this?" Like photos, if it was for real estate or something like that. And they're like, "Well, we thought you might have some." So that's kind of what led me down the path to really start thinking, all right, now I need to take this to the next level and start getting to doing professional work. And I went out and bought a Nikon Coolpix. That was my first camera. And then quickly grew out of that, and then I bought the Nikon D300. That was my first real camera that I got that
Mm.
I could change lenses and everything on. So, and that's why I shot all my commercial work on as well.
You're going to talk a little bit, I think, about Clyde Butcher's work, but I went on the internet to look. What was your first impression when you saw those huge prints?
During the headlights, because when you go into a gallery, you're usually seeing these little prints, and then all of a sudden now you kind of got to go, and they just keep going. It's just amazing. And I've talked to Clyde in person a number of times, and he wants you to feel like you're in the environment when you're standing in front of one of his prints. That's why they're just so big. And the detail is just amazing.
From
But
our earlier Go ahead, I'm sorry.
it's really it's really something just to stand there. If you've never been exposed to anything like that, you're stunned because it's in your face. There's no getting around it. It's something else to quite see these. It's frankly, it's a masterwork.
From our earlier discussion, it seems like Clyde Butcher and his work had a big influence on you,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to us covering that today. Now, with that, let's take a look at Spencer's first guest artist featured photo and hear the story behind it, and then we'll come back for our interview.
One of the things I like to look for in my black and white photography is subjects that are different that you wouldn't possibly see or necessarily see every day. I also like very striking images that have blacks and subjects that just pop off the background. So when a friend of mine gave me this Nautilus shell that had been sliced down through the middle, which I had never seen anything like this before, I thought it'd make a good subject to try and photograph. And then I had the idea, well, if we're going to photograph it, why not see if we can get a reflection out of it? So, this image, as far as the way that it's being set up, is what's doing the reflection. Everything's done in camera. There's no Photoshop here. Is I use a $10 piece of black plexiglass. And the hardest part of the shoot was actually to get the Nautilus shell to stand up on itself. So I ended up taking some tape, rolling it over to make it kind of like double-sided tape, and got it to stand up finally. And it's being lit by a small softbox that's off to camera left with a speed light, go dot speed light. It's taken with a Nikon Z6. And I was pretty amazed when I got this image. Like I said, there's no trickery here. It's just I placed the shell on this piece of shiny black plexiglass and used the softbox for off-camera flash, off-camera lighting. And I did photo stack it to make sure that from front to back I would have focus. So I set that up in my camera. It automatically went from front to back. I would say I took about 75 images, and then I went ahead and stacked them in Affinity Photo. And that is how this image is accomplished. So run out and get yourself a piece of black plexiglass if you want to get some amazing reflections.
Welcome back. It's time to get into our serious questions. Spencer, we covered a little bit in the intro, but how and when did you get started in photography, and what drove you to continue?
So, yeah, when I was a young child, about 8 years old, just kind of thought it was interesting. My grandfather actually had a dark room in his basement up
Wow.
north in state of New York, but I never actually got a chance to see how any of it worked. I just know that he was kind of in charge of taking all the photos at that time. So my father and mother got me this little Kodak 110 camera that took these little cartridges that I'd never seen before. They had 12 exposures on them. And so, being a kid, you don't realize there's money attached to this. So I went out and shot 12 exposures in like 30 seconds. And my parents basically had to tell me, now, wait a minute, you got to start thinking a little bit more about what it is you want to shoot. We can't just go out and shoot every little thing out there. Um, so that was kind of really the portray of, okay, now I got to put some thought into this. And then, just even going back when Kodak had the little drop off spots. So you take the envelopes, you dropped your film in, you had to fill it out. You had to wait for the film to come back, unlike today, right? You just click and there it is. But so it was an interesting process. But like I said, then when I got into college and I was doing the graphic design, I kind of needed photography to fill in the other gaps of the projects that I was working on. And that's really when I started getting more serious into it. And then when I got in the commercial side of it, that's when I changed from natural and available light to strobe. It just made a lot more sense, especially when I was shooting for magazines and things like that. You needed lightning in a box in order to make the photo that you wanted, not depend upon the weather and hope the sun was going to be out that day or not. Um, yeah, and then from there, I just like I said, then I found Clyde. I decided, hey, if he can do it, why shouldn't I? So that's when I went into 8x10 large format film, which now I say it's almost kind of crazy of all the stuff that goes into it. And but currently now I'm back to shooting Nikon Z6, a full frame digital, just simply because of time. I work full time for a local government, so that eats up a lot of my time. So that's what I'm doing now.
Wow. Terrific trail that your photography journey's taken you on. You were talking about going from ambient to indoor and strobes. Is it safe to say that's studio photography, right?
Yeah, basically. I've used strobe even outside. So if I need to battle the sun, there's nothing worse than sticking somebody and say, "Okay, face the sun because I need the light." And of course, what they do, they squint and they can't. It's just not a good look for them. So you try to get creative or shoot them in the shadows with umbrellas or soft boxes and things like that. So even when I did food photography, I go in there with a light stand, umbrella, and a flash, and I basically got a portable studio I can take with me.
Wow. For our viewers, Spencer is going to be joining the Black and White Bistro Barista team to feature selected photos you submit with our newest hashtag. Second question for you, Spencer. Who are the inspirational mentors that fueled your love of black and white photography? And what is it about each of them that really spoke to you?
So, like we mentioned about Clyde Butcher, excuse me. So, since I live in Southwest Florida, he actually has two galleries. One's in the Everglades, and the other one's about 30 minutes from where I live in Venice, Florida. So, I had heard this photographer was so close. I said, "Well, I should go check him out and see what that's about." Because I'd heard of everybody's heard of Ansel Adams. As I understand it, Clyde was trained under Ansel, so this was about as close as I was possibly going to get to seeing some original or some of the product of Ansel's instruction. So I drove up there and I was just hit in the face with immediately his gallery. Believe it or not, his gallery in Venice has the largest darkroom in North America. So the back half of the warehouse, because his prints are so large, he's got these huge tanks because they got to be developed, they got to be stopped, they got to be fixed. He's got to have a drying rack. He's got this old camera that he bought to project on the paper. It's just quite the experience. You can see how all this stuff was done. He's in his 80s now. I believe I know he's had one stroke. He may have had another one. Don't quote me on that. But so he's shooting digital now. But he just the tones and everything that, because you can walk right up to his prints, even though they're so big, and you can see every little detail of that leaf that's on there, the veins of the leaf, um, even the grasses that he's got in the Everglades, you can see every single blade of grass. So my father was with me at the time, and I said, "How is this possible?" Because anytime I shot 35 millimeter, this was not going to work at this size. He said, I still remember him saying the line, "It's the film." I'm like, "Film?" So I turned around and he's got a Deerdorf 8x10 is on a stand on a tripod that he had kind of as a display. And so I got to talk to him, Clyde. He was showing me the film holder and the film, and because now your sensor size is basically 8x10. He also has 12x20 size cameras, so it's even heavier. I mean, he's trucked all this stuff out in a boat out in the middle of the Everglades, had to set it up, take the photos. He's been chest deep in, what I call snake bite water out in the Everglades. So when you're starting with your film size is that big, you can make those enlargements and they just look absolutely gorgeous.
Wow. So Clyde studied directly under Ansel Adams,
As I understand, that's correct.
and then you got to study under Clyde Butcher. So that kind of makes Ansel Adams your grandpa.
Yeah, it's
Oh my goodness. That's pretty impressive.
yeah,
Anybody else?
I've been very fortunate that I've been able to talk to Clyde a few times on certain things, and he's a great gentleman. The other person I've actually took some classes from is Joe McNally. A lot of folks may
Wow.
not know him, but he shoots for a few publications you may or may not heard of. It's called Time Magazine, Sports Illustrated, National Geographic.
Whoa.
So, what Joe brings to the table is he's a master in lighting, and he's the one that kind of took the traditional studio strobe and kind of shrunk it down to using speed lights and light stands and things that the average person can now do, and you don't need some huge space to do it in. So Joe doesn't really shoot much black and white. He shoots a lot of environmental portraits, and they get him to do all kinds of crazy stuff. But I took what I learned from him and kind of added that to my black and white photography, and now I'm getting into black and white extreme macro photography, which is all flash based.
Amazing. So he was your influence on light then.
Yes, I totally, yeah, any artificial light. he's kind of the one that said, don't bow down to light. He said, make it do what you want it to do. And that's
Love
well, by using different modifiers and things like that, you can shape light, sculpt light. You can make somebody look like they're the happiest person on the planet. Or if you change the lighting direction, you can make them like they're maybe a villain kind of person. So light has that power.
For all you photographers out there, think about that for 1 second. What are you shooting when you take a photograph? Light and its interplay on your subject, or the light can be the subject. Wow. All right, let's take a break. We're going to now see Spencer's second guest artist featured photo and learn a little bit about how it happened.
This image has been one of my lifelong projects, I guess you could say. Somebody told me about this little clump of mangroves quite a while ago. Living in Florida, you would think, and we do have a lot of mangroves in Florida. The issue is that they're kind of all bunched up against the land, so it can be a challenge to try to get something that looks visually appealing. So once I found this little cluster here, I said, oh, this might make a nice photograph. We obviously call it here locally Mangrove Island. And one of the biggest challenges with this is just we had to find the right time of day. So it's early morning. I'm naturally a night person, so it was tough to get up early in the morning, but I did what I have to do, like every photographer. The tide was going out, and I actually had a little bonus with this. Is there was a little sailboat that was going by, as you can see in the right side of the photograph. So that white against the black horizon just really made it pop. As far as how it was taken, I just used my camera on a tripod. I try to do that to get the maximum amount of detail, to counteract any shake I may have. I processed the image in Affinity Photo with NYX Silver Effects Pro, just kind of burned in the sky. Tried to get some detail out of the roots, and I think with the roots being lighter against the dark water and the sailboat and the clouds, I think it just kind of pulls everything together. Everything's playing its little individual part as far as texture and tone, but overall, when you put it all together, I think it's just a visually striking image. And a lot of us local photographers, we have our own version of this, different times during the day for light or when the water's up or down. I've even done some long exposure with this. It's been a lot of fun. Unfortunately, this is out in our local harbor, so we've been pummeled by multiple hurricanes over the past 5 years, and with every hurricane, it's unfortunately becoming less and less. So hopefully, if we can get a break with the weather, it'll give this particular mangrove to start regenerating itself, hopefully.
We're back with Spencer Pullen again. Let's jump right into it. Spencer, we were just talking a couple of moments ago about light. Many of your images represent extreme levels of credibility and beautiful levels of studio photography. Can you share with our viewers how you made a couple of your favorite images?
Sure. One of them would be the Nautilus shell. I actually had a friend of mine that gave me a shell of a Nautilus that was cut down the middle. So you see all the little spirals and rings, which I had never seen anything like that before. I've seen it cut whole, but of course, living in Florida, right, we should have these things all over the place. But she actually special ordered one of these and gave it to me. So I thought, what can I do with this that's different? So I took a piece of plexiglass, laid it on the table, and the hardest part of this was trying to get that shell to stand up on its own. It's only about a quarter inch thick. So I ended up taking some tape and doubling it over on the ends just so it would stand up. And the plexi actually gives you a natural reflection. So to light it, I just took a Godox bare bones speed light. I think it's their 660 TT Think Light flash. It's like $60. It's cheap, and just threw it on a softbox on camera left. And to give a little bit of definition on the other side, I just took some white card and used that as a reflector. And the camera has the Godox transmitter on it to signal the flash to go ahead and fire. so that way you don't get any glare on the plexiglass. But honestly, I wish there was more to it for that one, but that's all there was to it. It was simply just the plexiglass was doing all the heavy lifting to get the reflection.
Wow, there's some great tips there for those of you who are thinking about trying some studio style shots. Excellent.
You don't need to spend a lot of money to do some really cool stuff. The next one I did was a pencil. I thought, well, what would a pencil look like at 500 times magnification? So I took a pencil and I purposely jammed it in this like little what you get at school, the little manual ones, and I just really reefed on it to purposely jar up the lead. So I went ahead and just stuck that in a clamp. And since that was floating in the air, I just put the flash real close to it and again in a softbox and used a white piece of card on the other side as a reflector. Now, because we are so close in extreme macro, this is where you kind of have to start dabbling in focus stacking. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. Some of the cameras will have a built-in system. I was crazy. I actually have a computerized rail that sits on a tripod that I can plug in the start and stop positions, and then it calculates how many nanometers it needs to move for each photo. So for that pencil, I might have shot like 200 images, and then I have it hooked up to the flash. So with each picture, the flash has to go off, and then they get stacked. I gave up Photoshop and Adobe years ago, so I'm now using Affinity Photo, along with DxO's Photo Lab and Nick's Silver Effects Pro to do my conversions to black and white. But Affinity will do the stacking for you, and it does a really good job.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a
You
lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
you mentioned now for the 3rd time, about a box. Can you describe to our viewers, just real simply, what a box is around your studio light?
Oh, the softbox? Okay, so
Softbox.
yeah, what the purpose of the softbox is to do, it kinda like what it sounds like, it's taking the flash head that's maybe 2 inches by 1 inch, and it's making it bigger, kinda like putting it through a window that comes into your house,
Yeah.
and that makes the light softer and allows it to wrap around the subject. So
Oh,
if anybody's ever had to take pictures of like a portrait of somebody, maybe they might have used an umbrella or seen an umbrella used, or maybe if they had their school picture taken and they had to sit there and the photographer's, okay, hold still. And they had these great big umbrellas. It's the same
yeah.
idea. It's taking a small light source and making it bigger, which softens the light and also helps it wrap around the subject.
Let me make a note. Hello, Amazon. Softbox. Okay, my wife's gonna kill you. Thank you for watching part 1 of episode 22 featuring Spencer Pullen. We'll be back next Saturday, March 1st, with part 2. Mark your calendars and don't miss it.